The first step to painting your glass jars is to make sure it's very, very clean, especially if you've had some sort of food product in it that had any oil. I like to use the Dawn dish soap. It really cuts through the grease really well. Scrub it up and dry it really well. And this is what you'll need to paint your glass jar. You'll need a paintbrush. These little chip brushes work really well. Some sandpaper. This is 150 grit, a very, very fine grit. And I like to use the glass cleaner wipes. They have an alcohol base to them and it cleans off all the residue left on the glass. And my homemade chalk paint. These wipes were made for eyeglasses, but they work really well for prepping your glass. You can also just use alcohol on a piece of paper towel, and that would work just as well also. And just make sure you give it a really good scrub with it and all around the rim so you get off all the last of the residue. And to paint my glass, I use my homemade chalk paint recipe listed here. Take a screenshot of it and you can save the recipe to your photos. I have a step-by-step tutorial in my playlist of how I make the chalk paint. I'll put that down below in my description, and then after you watch this video, you can go back and you can watch it as I make my chalk paint right from scratch. I always like to paint the bottom first and then let it completely dry before I do the sides. So now it's completely dry and we're ready to paint the sides of it. And you don't want it too thick. You just want a thin coat for your first layer and just paint the whole glass jar in thin, long strokes. Now, painting with chalk paint is not going to give you this smooth, pristine looking jar when you're done. It has a chalky texture and it can sometimes be a little bit streaky, especially if you put twinkle lights in your jar afterwards and they shine through. It's going to look streaky. It's just really, really difficult to get rid of that. But if you're going to put a graphic on it or a photo on your jar, or you're just leaving it painted to put flowers and stuff in, this method is perfect. Now, if I can just get this flipped over without making a mess, there we go. And I'm going to put the second coat on the bottom of the jar. Before we put our second coat on, I'm now going to take the sandpaper and I'm just going to give it a real light little sanding, just if there's little bumps or lumps or any little high spots, just to smooth it out a little bit. And you don't want to do any thicker grit than probably this one. Like using an 80 grit would be too aggressive. You just want a really fine sandpaper and just lightly go over the whole jar. And you don't have to make your chalk paint with white paint. I like to go to the hardware store and get the little testers of any color that I want, and you can mix that into your chalk paint recipe. And now we're ready for our second coat. And you're again going to do the same method that you did with the first one. Not too thick, just a light coat to cover the whole jar and around the rib of the lid. And you can determine after you put this coat on whether you want a third coat. I usually just stick with the 2 coats. I can usually get it covered well enough, but you can go back and do a third coat and just follow the same steps as you did before. When I tried to paint my jars with other types of paint, especially latex, the latex would just peel right off the glass and not adhere at all. The acrylic will stick, but it's still not as good a bond as this chalk paint. And I like just to take my paintbrush and just dab around the rim at the top after that second coat, just to seal it all in really well. And there you have your painted glass jar with homemade chalk paint. Now you can stop here and put a sealer on it, but I am going to put a graphic on it and make it look pretty. And I'm going to put on some Mod Podge graphic transfers. I have quite a few tutorials in my playlist on how to do this technique, so I'll put the link below and you can go back and you can check them out and learn how to make them yourself. I love using this Mod Podge graphic transfer method. I make these jars for every season. I make them for gifts. I design so many different graphics for them, and it's a lot of fun. Okay, and now we're ready to put on the top coat. And this is a very important step in this procedure. It's the Varathane water-based, crystal clear. I use a matte finish and it seals that jar really, really well when you've put that chalk paint on that glass jar. And you just want to put a light coat over the whole jar and let it dry, and you'll have a perfect painted glass jar. Now these jars are not waterproof. They might be a little bit water resistant. You could wipe it down with a wet cloth gently and it would be okay, but you could not submerge this in water and wash it. And there's a finished jar. Welcome to our beautiful chaos. And here are some more of my painted glass jars and the possibilities of what you can do with them. I love all these beautiful quotes. You can decoupage over them. You can do this method. You can just leave them blank. The possibilities are endless. I hope you've enjoyed today's tutorial and have inspired you to try to paint some of your own glass jars. Thanks for watching and have a great day.